Okay, welcome back everyone, and hope you had a lovely day today. So shading, another important part, a thing to learn about drawing, painting. At the moment this is showing in grayscale, black and white, but I'll explain how you would do it with using colors along the way. So what I have here is what we're going to demonstrate. It's a ball. You can tell it's a ball by its shading, and you need to choose a light source. That's very important. Now we're going to simplify it and just choose, like this ball has one light source shining from the right, and it's hitting here first, so that's the highlight. Then obviously as the ball goes round, it goes into the darker side, and then because the ball is solid, it casts its own shadow. But there are things to notice, rules for shadows and shading. One, for a start, is underneath here, there's a slight little glow, and that's called reflective light. And what happens is the light is hitting the white surface and it's reflecting up under the shaded side of the ball. Also, another thing, shadows never have an outline. I see a lot of people do them with outlines. They don't exist. And to explain what's going on here with this shadow, I have spotlights above me. There's about 4 around me. And if I have my hand very high over the surface of the paper, well, what's happening there is my shadow of my hand is very light grey, and it's very blurred, not very sharp edge. But the nearer my hand or any object gets to the surface the shadow is cast upon, it's darker grey and it's more sharper edge. There, blurred, lighter, nearer, sharper, darker. And that is happening here with this ball, right underneath sharper, dark, black, and as you go, the shadow from the top of the ball to the floor is lighter grey and more blurred on the edge. So hopefully you can all see that. So what we're going to do is start by drawing a circle. I'm just doing it roughly, just a little guide, because I'm going to shade it in, so I don't really want an outline. So just a nice circle. So to shade it, you have to consider the object's shape. Now, this is a sphere. If we're going to do tree trunks, they're called cylinders. So they're round that way, left and right, vertically. But this is a ball. So, I've got a bit of fluff on the paper there. Okay. So how do we shade it? Well, first of all, we need a light source or a direction of light. So we're going to put the light up here, top left. And we can call that the sun. Why not? There we go. So how do you figure out where is the light is part of that ball first? Well, it's very simple, a bit like our perspective and the vanishing point. You can put a ruler on your light, a point here, and take it, and where does it hit your ball first? There. Strike through that ball and carry on. That's where it hits first. So that's the highlight. And coming away from it on that angle, or this axis here, it gets darker and darker and darker until the darkest underneath. So we've got to start by shading it. Now, the way to shade a ball or a sphere is to do it in kind of like phases of the moon or crescents. So we start with our darkest phase first, and I'm going to use my finger to help blend all this together after I've done all the phases. So here's your darkest phase. Now, you may be wondering, well, that's all well and good in black and white or grayscale, but what happens if I'm trying to do this in color? Well, to make excuse me, I'll just blow that away. To make a shade of any color, you add black. That's the rule. So let's say you wanted a red ball, not a grayscale ball. You would do your darkest shade of red by adding black to your red paint. The next phase up would be just your red paint pure from the tube, this one here. So that would be your straight color from the tube, say cadmium red, there. And then your next phase would be lighter, so you would add white to red. So your middle one is the true color, your shaded one is black to your color, and the top one is white with your color, whatever it is, but don't go all the way because the highlight is the white dot at the top. So what we're going to do now is just respect the curve. So as I'm going down towards my bottom of my sphere, it's getting darker and darker, like this. And you'll see I'm curving. Now, if you were trying to blend this with a paintbrush, you would be doing lots of like very careful blending and feathering. Okay, there's our ball. So that basically now looks like a solid object, and there's our highlight at the top. So it's floating in midair at the moment, so we need to put it on some kind of surface for it to cast its own shadow. Solid objects don't let light pass through them, so it casts a shadow. And just explaining about the color thing again, I said you add black to whatever color it is you're using to make a shade darker. Well, if this page is white and you add black to white, gray is the color of the shadow, and there it is. Okay. So let's put our ball on a beach towel and call it a beach ball. There we have our beach towel. Doesn't look real yet because it's sat on the towel and it would cast its own shadow. We're seeing this from behind the ball with the sun in front, top. So that means the shadow is going to come this way. But how do you figure out where to put the shadow? Well, again, if you put a ruler on your light source and come and hit your towel, you can see it's hitting this part of the towel, so it would be white still. You can also see it's hitting that part of the towel, would also be white. But if you take your ruler and you go past your ball edge like that, and the other side the same, that's the zone your shadow belongs in. So how do you do the shadow of a sphere, a round shadow, in perspective? It becomes an oval or an ellipse. So we've got to fit, we start under our ball, we've got to fit an ellipse or an oval in this area. And it must be the highest there at that point. That's the shadow from the top of our ball, that's the angle, so that's where the peak of your shadow ends. So it needs to be darkest underneath first. And again, I'll just do this, the darkest part, and I'll use my finger to help with the sort of the blending. Sharpest on the edge here first, just like our previous diagram. And then as we come away from our ball, we're going to start getting lighter, so less pressure on my charcoal until we get lighter still back down here. And then when I blur that together, it'll all make sense. So we start here with our furthest away shadow, very light grey, very blurry edge. And then as we come back towards our underside of our ball, it's going to start getting darker. And that's how this starts to look so much more real, because this really goes on in real life. Now, I'm not bothered with all the mathematics. My ellipse looks a little bit wrong there, so I'm just going to tuck that in. A bit too much there. That's kind of about right. Now, I've got this little glow going on, and I've exaggerated it here. But that is that reflective light that happens in real life. So this is a white towel. We all know that white, you're cooler if you wear a white t-shirt than you are if you wear a black. And that's because it reflects. So the sun's light is hitting the towel, reflecting all over the place, even in the underside part of our ball. And that's giving you reflective light. Now, if this was a black beach towel, you would no longer really see a shadow. You would see a little one because the black in sunlight looks a bit charcoal grey. But black absorbs sunlight or any colour even. So it would not reflect anything back underneath. However, if this was a red beach towel and this was a white ball, you would have a glow of red reflecting off the red beach towel in this reflective light area. You would see colour, a little bit sort of reddish underneath. So what happens if you have in a landscape more than one object and you have to have shadows for them? Well, as I mentioned, cylinders, like tree trunks, we're going to do a palm tree here. There's one, very childlike and simple. One palm tree, and we're going to do another over here to the left. And we'll have it sort of end about there. So there are our two palm trees on the beach. So how do we shade those? How do you know where the lightest part is and the darkest? Well, we know they're cylindrical this way, up and down. The shading will be up and down. But you need to figure out first where the light is hitting. You cannot keep that angle for our ball for everything else in the picture. And I'll explain why. If you keep that same angle of attack as the ball and you do it for your tree, the shadow will be going like this, which is impossible because the sunlight is coming straight down and hitting this part of the beach. So we need to figure out first how to shade our trunks, and then secondly, what angle the shadow of those tree trunk bases should be. So take a ruler again and you go across to your palm tree, and it's first hitting this whole side of the tree. So it goes from light to dark. The left tree, it's hitting the right side, so it goes from light to dark. So we can happily now shade in the dark to light, and we'll just use our finger again for that. So there's that tree trunk there, and then this one here. And we'll just shade that with the finger there. Okay, so it's that kind of thing. I could spend more time making it nicer, but you get the theory. So how do you know what angle to do their shadows? Again, a ruler or a straight line at your light source to the base of your tree trunk and carry on past it. That's the angle of that tree trunk shadow. Again here, light to tree trunk base, carry on, and that's the angle of that tree shadow, which now makes sense because it could never have been the same as our ball because it would have been out in the sand where the sun is shining. So just like our ball and the hand demonstration, darkest first, keeping that angle that we've got our guide. Don't shade wider than your tree because there's nothing else there to block that sunlight here and here. And as you come away, and I'll exaggerate this a bit, is you're going to start getting lighter again, and it's going to go off the page. And that's okay, but there it is, getting lighter and more blurred and darker under the trunk. That's why that looks more real. So it's not the same shade all the way. And eventually off the page you would have the shadows of the leaves or the palm fronds. This one here, we've got our angle again. Don't go past the width of your tree trunk and just drag that off the page like so. Okay, so I won't bother with that. You get the idea. Now I've simplified this. I'm treating this as though this sand, this beach, is completely smooth and flat. You've got to be careful with shadows. If they are running over uneven surfaces, they cannot be parallel lines anymore. What I mean by that is if you've got some little bumps in the sand, some hills like this, and you've got a tree here, there, and the light here, so that's the angle. That would be your angle on a flat sand, but it's going to go down the hill and start going up, but then it comes behind that hill and up and then starts doing that. And then the same thing here at the end. Okay, now you can tell that now looks like a shadow on an uneven surface. So just to finish off, before I take questions at the end, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to just explain to you length of shadows, because I did that without any mathematics and so on, and they are involved. But what I'm going to do is give you an example. If you are walking on the pool deck of our ship and you are in sunrise or sunset, you can have the entire shadow of your person the whole length of the ship, a really long shadow. And yet in noontime, midday, there are a lot shorter, much less shadows around. So to explain why, let's take the floor or the pool deck and let's have a person standing on the pool deck like so. There we are. At midday, sun is directly above. There it is in the sky. If you take a straight line down to your person, it's going to hit the top of their head, the light. It's going to hit the edges of their shoulders, but there's going to be no shadow around because the shadow is at the base of that person only. As the sun starts to drop mid-afternoon in the sky to here, you take your lines again to the base of your person, here, to the feet, to the floor in front. There's light on this floor. But if you take the line to the top of the person, to the floor below, that's your length of shadow to there at that time in the day. If you drop even lower, like I was talking about sunset, sunrise, down to here, you also take your line from the center of your light to the floor, still hitting this person on the left, take the line to the top of the head and beyond. And that's then a longer shadow. So that explains very simply that the lower the light goes, the longer shadow is cast. So that's it, folks. Shadows in a nutshell. And I hope you enjoyed that and found that useful. And thank you for watching.